Missing home, missing the things that you call upon. Setting sun.
Just 2 minutes. 2 minutes to help your body move. There you go. There you go. Okay.
Even if things all fall through the cracks again. 'Cause I've been losing sleep.
Everything hurts so bad. Excruciating pain. The brain is physically in so much pain. The nerves from my back of my head, through my neck, through my back.
Welcome to the Face of Malpractice. I am your host, Melissa. For those of you tuning in for the first time, this channel is dedicated to featuring interviews with fellow psych drug harm warriors. It is not just my story to tell. This is a platform meant to create space for others to share their truths. Today, we'll be interviewing Kelsey Martins. Kelsey was on antidepressants for 17 years and has been harmed by them. She is a certified functional brain health coach and an advocate for psych med harm, safety prescribing practices, and nervous system regulation. Thank you, Kelsey, for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Melissa.
Yeah, definitely. So I really think like a good place just to start is like, why don't you take us back to when you were first prescribed antidepressants? Like, what was happening in your life at that time?
Yeah. So just kind of in who I am, I've always been an anxious person, an anxious child, probably an anxious fetus. And, that's just kind of always been part of my persona. And it was just kind of okay until I reached middle school age. And there was an incident that happened in my middle school gym where I would imagine it was probably a warmer day out, or maybe I didn't eat, or I'm not exactly sure the circumstances, but I ended up fainting during gym class. It was really, really traumatic for me. And that kind of blossomed, after the fact into this fear of the gym, which then blossomed into this fear of the school, which then blossomed into a fear of leaving any place other than my home. And so here I am, this 12-year-old child who is still trying to get a grasp on how the world functions, what's safe, what can you trust, who can you trust. And I'm just kind of in this like pit of despair, essentially. I was pulled out of school for about 4 to 6 months. And during that time, I was going through intensive psychotherapy. I was meeting with a psychiatrist. I was prescribed Zoloft at that time. I was prescribed 25 milligrams initially. And I'm pretty sure within probably 6 months or so, the timeline is a little foggy, I was then increased to about 50 milligrams of Zoloft. And, at that time in my life, I do think that the medication was necessary. Like, I do think that it was the crutch that I needed for me to trust my environment again, to trust others again, to trust myself again. And so we just kind of coasted with that dosage. We coasted with the medication. And life just seemed to level out for the remainder of middle school into the beginning of high school. And when we were getting ready to transition me from 8th grade into high school is when we decided to increase the dose a little bit more, just because I was anxious about the idea of being in a new environment. Like, I had just refound safety in my old school. I had refound safety in my routine. So the idea of increasing the medication was just this extra safety net that would allow me to make that transition easier. And so, to be honest with you, I don't think there's really any big story to tell around the medication journey from the high school era of me. Life just kind of seemed to work. The antidepressant seemed to work. I felt stable. And I think I just kind of subconsciously accepted that, like, I was just a person that needed to be on medication. And that was that. And then I went to college, and, you know, I kind of had this idea of, I conquered my anxiety. Like, I am this warrior. I need to tell my story to others. So I initially went into the field of psychology because I wanted to learn all about the brain. I wanted to be able to help other people on their journey. But little did I know that my journey was just starting. And so that ended up taking a pivot. I went down a different route. I went the health sciences route. But what's really interesting is during my freshman year of college, I was told that I needed to get my wisdom teeth out. And the idea of going into surgery, the idea of being under anesthesia, the idea of being, you know, open, even in a minimally invasive surgery, it was enough to just shake me to my core. And so here I am, like, I'm on the internet like 8 hours a day. What are possible contraindications for surgery? What should I be taking? What shouldn't I be taking? And I ended up coming across this information around SSRIs increasing bleeding during surgery. And so I was like, okay, that's enough for me to want to come off. I feel like I'm in a good spot. I feel like I've got this lived experience that has brought me to this place where I've conquered my battles. I feel strong. I feel safe and secure. I'm learning from, you know, my college about psychology and how the brain works too. And I feel like I've got that to lean on as well. So I'm like, you know, I think this is the time for me to close the chapter on antidepressants. So I ended up having a consultation with my doctor. And I told her the story and, you know, the reasoning why I wanted to come off. And she supported it. And she advised me the classic linear taper, 3 weeks tops, I think, 2 to 3 weeks maybe, coming from 75 milligrams down to 0. And at this point, I had been on these antidepressants for 8 years. My nervous system had grown up on these antidepressants. My brain grew up on these antidepressants. So, you know, I look back to myself and I'm just like, you did not need to go through what you went through during that point. I mean, the withdrawal, crazy, absolutely crazy. I remember just insane brain zaps. I remember like having this like gut-wrenching sensation all the time, not even like anxiety gut issues, but just like physical gut issues. Lots of paranoia. I was not sleeping through the night. I mean, like the classic withdrawal symptoms that we all hear about. But I didn't know what that was at the time because I wasn't told to experience these things. I was told, you're probably going to have a couple of days where you're tired. You might feel a little anxious, but you're going to be fine. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to be fine. This is great. And so to have that come and hit me right before this surgery that I'm already keyed up and on edge about, I mean, it was enough to just shake me to my core. So after the surgery, I don't know the exact timeline, but I ended up reinstating because I was like, I'm clearly not a good candidate to come off of these medications, right? Like, I must need them. That was the story that I got from my doctor. Well, if you're having these symptoms, it's because you need it, right?
I want to like jump through the screen when I hear that. Like,
I know. And I've heard that at least 4 more times since that initial consult with different doctors too, because I didn't want to take no for an answer, but I kept hearing the same thing over and over. So I was like, okay, well, there's got to be something to this if I keep hearing the same thing from every single provider. And so anyways, you know, I definitely feel like I had gotten some protracted withdrawal on top of the acute withdrawal from that incident. To be honest with you, like when I think back to that time, it is so incredibly foggy to me, which tells me that there was probably a decent amount of trauma to be had. And that's the reason that I'm just not able to fully connect the dots on the whole timeline. But I do remember months after the fact, which is why I kind of am leading myself to believe that there was some protracted withdrawal. It was Christmas Day, and we always have a celebration at my grandmother's house, and it's so wonderful, and it's a special time. And I was driving home from that party, and I remember I'm behind the wheel, and it was a little eerie to me. Like there wasn't a whole lot of cars and traffic on the road. And so it was just like, it was dark, it was quiet. I'm with my thoughts. I'm probably overstimulated. I'm probably in withdrawal. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, am I driving right now? Is this real? Am I on the road? Did I stop? Am I going forward? Is my foot on the brake or is it on the gas? Like I just had this like moment of what I can only explain as likely DPDR. Like just this, I did not feel in my body, in space and time. Like I questioned my reality. I questioned everything. And that was really terrifying because I had never experienced anything like that ever. And it got to the point where I ended up having to pull over on the side of the road and ditch my car. And my boyfriend at the time had to drive me the rest of the way home. And that prevented me from getting in the car and driving for an entire year afterwards. Which, I mean, I was in my 20s. Like, wow. That's the epitome of freedom, right? And I'm in college and I'm supposed to be thriving and I'm in withdrawal and I'm terrified and I'm paranoid and I feel like I'm losing my sense of self and I'm losing my freedoms and my independence. I feel like I'm going backwards in time and like I'm never going to be able to be off of these meds. I felt stuck because if I'm off of them and something like this happens again, I'm never going to go through that again. Like I swore to myself, I will never put myself through that again, ever. And so I just kind of like destined myself to this marriage to Zoloft for the rest of my life. And I didn't question it. I just was like, you know what? The lesser of two evils is for me to feel good. I feel good on the antidepressant. I'm going to go back on. And so, you know, fast forward to probably, I don't know, springtime after the car incident, the driving incident. I do remember that I ended up increasing because my doctor said, oh, well, wow, this is crazy. Like you shouldn't be having these symptoms. You probably just need more. It's probably breaking through. So I said, sure. Okay.
That's literally a sign of harm. That's literally a sign of harm, but okay.
Yeah, exactly. I know now.
I know.
But so I increased to 100. And over the course of a year and a half, I gained 40 pounds. And I just, my anxiety didn't even get better. I think subconsciously felt like, okay, this is just my new baseline at these meds. And that's just the way that it's going to be. So again, I didn't question anything for years until the pandemic hit. Oh, wow. And when the pandemic hit and I was hearing about people not being able to get their medications because they were being shipped internationally and like all the shipping delays and all that, I just had this internal kind of panic and just like come to Jesus moment of I am dependent on these medications. Like if I were ever in a circumstance where I didn't have access to this, it's game over to me. And that I hated the fact that I had to rely so heavily on something that I didn't even want to be on.
Yeah.
I did not want to be on them, but I didn't know the alternative. I didn't know if there was an alternative. So I started looking online, and I'm coming across these detox centers for antidepressants. I'm coming across try this amino acid therapy protocol, try this, like all these like supplement recommendations, right? Try this program, try that. And I look into it, it looks promising, but just something in me just said, this is just not it though. There's got to be something else. And so I never actually took it upon myself to try any of the things, and I'm so glad that I didn't. And it actually just so happened it was 2024 when I was moving into an apartment with my fiance, and I'm on the floor and I've got YouTube on the TV, and at that time I was still trying to like piecemeal, okay, how can I actually get off of these meds? Because I was working for a brain health company. I currently still am. And so I'm a health coach in the brain health capacity. Like, I understand a lot of the root cause functions of what leads us to being anxious, leads us to being depressed. And I understood that, in more cases than not, medication is not the answer, but it is unfortunately the route that we're led on because it's the information that is available to the doctors that we trust so heavily. And so I really started to question, like, do I really want to be on these forever? And so I'm on YouTube, and my algorithm is just everything about psychiatric drugs and the research and all that. And I'm on the floor, I'm putting together furniture, and I come across this video of Dr. Horowitz, and he's talking about hyperbolic tapering. And so I click on it because I'd never heard about hyperbolic tapering before. And he's talking all about the difference between SIRT occupancy tapering and linear tapering. And it was just like this light bulb went off in my head. And I'm like, this is why I've never been able to actually see if I can come off of these meds and be okay. This is why I've never actually been successful, and why I keep getting back on the hamster wheel of reinstating and increasing and reinstating and increasing. And so I was like, enough is enough. I'm done. I don't want to be on these anymore. I want to see how I show up in this world as myself without medication, because here I am, 29 years old. I don't know how I exist in this world without medication. Like, I don't. And so I don't know how my nervous system functions without it. I don't know how my brain functions without it. I don't know what my personality is like without it. And so it led me onto this kind of like self-realization of, it's time to put your trust in the science. It's time for you to try one last time to come off. It's time for you to go slow, take a couple of years, and just see what happens. So I initially met with Outro, and they were fantastic. I have nothing but great things to say about them. They gave me so much confidence in the idea of coming off. I told them my entire story, like asking, am I even a candidate? Do you think that I'm going to be okay? And, they, without a doubt in their mind, like, yes, you are going to be okay. This is going to work. You just need to keep the course. You need to keep the pace, and you need to sit down and buckle up for a long journey, because it's not going to happen next month, and it's probably not going to happen next year. It's going to take some time, but you're going to be better off because it's going to take time. So that kind of leads me to today. I am still very much on my journey. I'm 15 months in. I'm down to 20.2 milligrams. So just starting to get into kind of the needle point of the craft.
Yeah. So this is from 100 milligrams. You got that's amazing.
Yeah.
That is just fantastic.
Thank you. It's been a journey.
Yeah.
Every single month, every single week, every day even is a journey in and of itself. at the very beginning, like I could pretty much guarantee you how I would show up on a given day based on where I was in my taper cycle. Like the first week, it was a lot of fatigue. And the second week, it was a little more anxiety, maybe a little bit of depression, some sleep issues. And then that would continue into week 3. And week 4, I would kind of come back to myself. And that carried me through the last 12 months. And then I hit my biggest destabilization window of all time in November of last year, of 25. I dropped from 25 to 22, which again is just like the very tip of that needle point down. And I was getting 2 to 3 hours of sleep a night. I was anxious all day long. My nervous system felt like it was a live wire. Like I felt needles and pins throughout my entire body. You know, if you're on like a fair ride and you have that stomach drop feeling if you go from really high down, I'd be laying in bed at night and almost asleep, and then I just have that feeling in my stomach. And it was to the point where I'd have to go into my living room and it'd be 10:30, 11:30 at night, and I'm running in place trying to just like move the energy around so I can go to sleep.
And this would happen when your brain was transitioning, is that it's always it's very common for us. The brain has to re-architect around the transition. But anyway, yes, that makes it's brutal.
Crazy. So it's just been this really insightful learning curve. A lot of ups, a lot of downs, a lot of highs, a lot of lows, a lot of should I be doing this? Can I actually be doing this? And then the next day, why did you even think that? Of course you can do this. You're doing wonderful. So it's very much a journey in learning how to trust yourself too, because taper symptoms are, it's kind of like the devil on your shoulder. It's going to echo to you the entire time. Exactly. You can't do this. You can't. So you have to really listen to the angel.
We're so spellbound. You're so spellbound on the drugs. And then that spellbind just increases tenfold as you start to come off. Like, I remember when I was tapering, I was harmed by antidepressants and then benzos came in. So when I was tapering off benzos, like there was no convincing me it was the drug. Like I could, and it's like, here I am, akathisia, crawling the walls, running like around my house, my feet are bleeding. And I'm so convinced this is me. Like there's no way it could be the medication. And so it's like you said, it's like a part of you has to hold on to something at the depths of yourself to know that this is not you. This is a byproduct of psych drug harm, as you were alluding to.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And when you're in the middle of it and in the thick of it, you don't have the rationale to be able to understand that. No. So that's part of the reason why I've continued to document my journey on social media is when I'm in the thick of it, I go back to my videos and I watch it and I prove to myself, see, you had a hard day here and then you posted 2 days later and you were fine. And that happened 4 other times, one after another. Like, this is going to be okay. You are going to come out of it again.
100% right. And I love that you do that. I think that's like, because like you're right, like when those waves, bad days hit, it feels impossible to see if you had previous good days, right? I do have a few questions just based off of what you've shared so far. So going all the way back to the beginning where you talk about being like an anxious child and you were probably anxious in the womb. Was your mother anxious during the pregnancy, or was there a complication in the pregnancy that could have induced that, do you think, or that you're aware of?
Well, not that I'm aware of. I was my parents' first child. So there's always that anxiety, right? Of like, you didn't know what to expect. It always kind of makes me wonder about the ancestral effect though, because like your grandmother basically has like your egg in her at that time. Totally. And my grandmother she was a very anxious lady. She had 6 kids of her own, stay-at-home mom. Like there's a lot going on in her life. So you kind of wonder about that versus like my mom's influence. But then also, there could be, genetic components, there could be, biological components, nutrient deficiencies, environmental. She was a hairdresser. Was I sensitive to the environment that she was working with? Like, there's so many things that
So
you just
many things.
wonder.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally. And it's like, and it's interesting, like a lot of people that do even like past life work or like hypnosis, like, and they find out that they struggled in the womb when given birth. And that goes on to be the imprint that like that starts the manifestation of like their personality. Because if you see a personality, what's a personality? That's a byproduct of environment, of trauma, your upbringing. Like that's all this is. This is, a part of the vessel that we're in. And so when you think about it that way, like the amount of people that I have seen worked with that like have done the, hypnosis or whatever type of work to get them to that root, because they were never aware, and they never aware of like how that went on to influence who they are today. And I think it's just so fascinating. So I wanted to bring that up because I was curious if there was any insight. But yes, you're so right. There's so many factors that can be considered there. And I'm curious, like, when you were that child, that 12, I believe you said you were 12 years old at the time and given Zoloft, like, do you think that if the doctor was like, maybe let's look into, I don't know if at the time if they had cognitive behavior therapy or if there was something else, like, do you think you would have been open to it, or you were like, this is what makes sense only? Like, where were you? I just curious.
You know, well, I did a lot of like CBT. I did art therapy. I did a lot of intensive therapies. And, part of this journey for me is a lot of my past, like, I don't really fully remember. Like, if you were to ask me how I felt in the moment, I couldn't tell you. Like, it is so far from my ability to regurgitate, which also makes me wonder, like, these medications, they do have an impact on your memory to some extent. We wonder if there's a component to that as well too. But so I've had to rely heavily on my parents' reenactment of it and recount of it all. They said that I very much wanted to get back in the swing of things. Like, I wanted to do anything that would help me. I got right into therapy and I was all about it. And when that didn't work and medication was offered, I was right about it. Again, because I was told that it was going to be the silver bullet that I thought it was going to be.
Totally. You're 12 years old. You're not developed. Your brain is not even developed.
No.
I mean, that's what's like, I think is so heartbreaking when I see people like yourself that are given these drugs. My heart goes out to anyone put on these drugs, to be honest, because there's not informed consent. And so you're not making a decision for you. Someone is taking away your body in some form in your mind.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just devastating when you take these drugs so young and your brain and your nervous system is now developing around that. And so I guess my next question for you would be like, do you feel grief? And you could plead the fifth on this. You could plead the fifth on any question we ask. Do you feel grief on all the years of like knowing that you don't even know who you are without these meds? Like, your personality has been developed, altered by these meds.
I go through that question a lot. I'm currently in therapy. I've always been in therapy my entire life. And that's a big focal point for us right now, is this grief that I'm feeling around my past. And maybe not the entirety of my past, because again, like, I don't know. I go back and forth on whether or not, like, I'm glad that I went on the meds when I was that young, or if I didn't, like, I don't think that if I wasn't on those meds, I don't think I'd be the way that I am today. But is that for better or worse? You never know, right? You don't know. So at any rate, yeah, there is a heavy layer of grief, because the big realization that I've come to is I didn't realize how numb I actually was my entire life until I've started to come off of these meds. And my spectrum of emotion has increased from this narrow window all the way outwards. And I'm feeling highs that I've never felt, and I'm feeling lows that I've never felt, and everything in between.
Yeah.
And, you kind of wonder if that shapes the decisions that you end up making over the years, for sure. And not to say that I made poor decisions that I look back on of like, why would you do that? But more so on the other side, like, I really wanted to exist in this comfort of this safety in life because I had felt like so many of my years when I was younger, that's what I was searching for and seeking. And so to have this narrow window of existence and having that be safety to me, are there other experiences that I could have done that would actually have made me feel more safe if I was able to actually feel that?
Totally. And what I want to make sure I say here is that I'm so sorry for this journey you had to walk. I want to make sure that's said, that my heart goes to you and of course anyone in this community that has endured. Um, for me, it's a form of violation essentially, right? And so I'm so sorry. And it's interesting. I think this is a really important topic talking about the grief, because it's like, yes, we know that you have a really beautiful life ahead of you, right? We know that that's going to be fucking epic and you're going to live like you've never lived, like you get a second chance at life, right? That's true. And the grief is true. And so like I think that's a really big part of healing, is to feel that, because that still lives within you. The body is brilliant. Like just because, like even shame, right? Shame is such an unnecessary emotion, right? How many of us carry shame? But the ultimate truth is that even if we shouldn't be feeling it, that still lives in many of us. And therefore it needs to be felt. And because that is actually a step forward to true healing, I find. And I think that's amazing that you are doing this grief work. And I'm sure it sounds like it's ongoing. It always is. And then you'll get there, but I'm happy to hear that that's like the work you're doing.
For sure. And there's layers to it. You do the initial healing and then you
Yeah.
go under and you're like, oh shit, here comes the healing again, right? Let's peel back all the other layers.
That's right.
So yeah, the thing that I'm coming to, realization of is the emotions that I demonized and pathologized in my past, I should not have, because that is part of the human experience. And there's beauty in the rawness and the depth of despair, as well as the highs of everything. And so it's just kind of like shifting my mindset around that of like, if I have depressed days or I have days where I'm highly anxious, it's like, okay, this is like really beautiful that my body's able to speak to me with these emotions to tell me that there's a need that hasn't been met.
That's exactly right. And it's so relative, because we live in a society that has said negative feelings are bad, so you have to numb them. Like this is a big part of our culture. Like if you go to Tibet, they're celebrating your grief. They're celebrating your mourning. They're celebrating the depths of hell, that when you go and you do that and then you rebuild, that to them is currency, right? Here, this is the opposite of currency in the Western society and most of societies around the world. It's exactly to your point, and it's like it it is relative, and it's a gift that our body is trying to tell us, hey, there's something to look at. You're right.
It absolutely is. I mean, like, I don't know. These meds are not meant to be a lifelong companion of yourself. And to think that, at one point in my life, I settled to that idea, there's like this grief of the what if of my life. What if I didn't try one more time? What if I didn't actually trust myself that I didn't want to be on these meds? Would I ever have that appreciation for the entire spectrum of emotion? Probably not. And that's a really narrow life to live.
Kind of it's like the worst and the best gift that came into your life, right? It's two sides of the same mouth, right? Oh, yeah, two sides of the same mouth. It's
The
kind of
yin
that
and yang of it all.
That's right. That's right. Can you, I think what I'm curious now about is like, how did this impact your relationship with your parents? I'm curious about that.
Yeah. I have a lot of empathy for them. That's a tough decision to make when you are trying to do everything that you can for a child that is basically helpless beyond their own, saving at that point. This is not anything that they had ever dealt with before to the magnitude that I was going through. I mean, I couldn't even step foot into my school. It got to the point where I couldn't step foot of like my house some days, they had to miss a lot of work. They had to organize places for me to stay while they had to work. There's a lot of empathy that I hold around that. and I do hold a lot of empathy around the decision to ultimately medicate, because I don't think that they were jumping at that decision of like, oh, yes, let's do it. That's awesome. You know, like I would imagine that they had their own qualms with it. And is this really a good idea? Is this okay? But they got the reassurance that they needed from the doctor at that time that lessened their anxieties about me being on this. And so I don't hold any negative emotions around their, you know, consenting basically to me being on these meds. I do just think though that the world of psychiatry, this world that I so deeply wanted to be a part of for so many years, I wanted to be a clinical psychologist. I wanted to be the person that was part of the prescribing journey, because I felt like, oh my gosh, this life that I'm living on these meds is so beautiful. Like, other people need to be able to appreciate that. It just makes me think that there's so much that they're missing, and it's such an underdeveloped field that, and unfortunately it's the rite of passage in our Western medicine world, where if you're sick, you go to the psychiatrist and there's a pill for every ill there. So if there's any issues that I have with the past, it's around the field versus the person.
I cannot agree with you more. And it's like when you look at it, therapists are a part of this problem, right? And actually, it actually goes right back to their own shadow. Like when when they feel like they've hit a cap or they can no longer fix, because their greatest shadow is helplessness. And therefore, if they no longer can fix, I think it makes sense that you go on a psychiatric drug. I think let's look into a manual that's sponsored by big pharma. Of course, ultimately because they want you to feel broken, and if you're broken, you're easier to be prescribed. You're compliant, and the list goes on. So it's it it's so, you know, there's so many people like yourself that I'm meeting that are like entered this field and hoping to help, and then they've had this really tough, difficult, rude awakening, and you're like, everything you once believed. I think that is one of the greatest journeys. It's like you once had this belief, to everything you thought you knew, to have it flipped on the other side. I mean, what a journey to walk. Really think about that. Like, what a journey to come here and walk that.
And to be so young to have that experience too, you know, like
That's right. That's right.
there's a lot of beauty in disguise around that as well, because I do feel really hopeful about the future ahead. I feel like I've got a lot of time on my side to be able to bounce back from these years. I don't feel like I lost many years. I do feel like I lost some years though.
Yeah, for sure.
Especially because, you know, like my now husband and I, we are trying to plan for a family, and we're having to basically put that dream on hold for at least the foreseeable future, probably another 3 to 4 years, not only because I'm in the taper process, but because I need to allow my nervous system to heal after this experience to then go on something even more impactful. And, you know, I've gotten a lot of pushback from my doctors around continuing this choice to unmedicate for pregnancy. Because the thing that they always come back with is, well, you're on Zoloft. That is one of the most heavily researched medications for pregnant women. There's a lot of positive outcomes for patients that go through pregnancy on this medication. And, you know, I took their words and I did my own research. I always really try hard not to make emotional decisions. I want to make sure that there's clear science that backs them. So I did my own digging, and that's not the truth. It's not the truth at all. I mean, they're finding that patients who are pregnant while on Zoloft, their fetus is coming out with low birth weight, pulmonary hypertension,
That's right.
and they have what do they call it? Fetal adaptation syndrome or something like that, which is just this fancy word for they're going through withdrawal. Like these SSRIs, they cross the blood-brain barrier in your fetus. And so it never sat well with me, of the idea of like, by me continuing to take this medication while growing a family myself, do we actually know how that is manipulating their brain development? No, we don't. Because we don't even know how it's manipulating ours. They've been studied for 15 months.
Yeah, exactly. They don't even know in adults, right?
No.
Like the FDA has only done 8 to 12 weeks themselves, and then you have some meta-analysis that go up to 2 years max. What happens after 2 years? And then there's folks like you that are on it for over a decade.
Yep.
And
There's got to be something to that. Oh my gosh, that is
Isn't that
the biggest
mind-blowing?
point of contention that I have, is the fact that this is not being continuously researched. I
That's right.
understand like the bigger players at play. I see why it's happening that way.
Yeah.
But it's just so unfortunate that so many of us have fallen into complacency of staying on these meds because, well, there's no big issues of you being on them. So why would you want to come off if you can stay on them?
And also the doctors are just straight up lying. Like it's actually, they don't actually know the existing literature. They don't even know, like they think there's 30-year study somewhere. That study doesn't exist. So they're just speaking propaganda that they've been trained by the pharmaceutical reps. Like they don't even realize that they're a byproduct of the making. And that it's just devastating. And I think you're 100% right. And there is clinical research that shows the harm that it's occurring, because it does pass right through the child. And I think there's literature that shows like how a child that is receiving antidepressants through the mother, they're more likely to develop depression. They're more likely to develop all anxiety. I mean, this research is coming out, right? But the doctors ignore that literature because that's not being pushed through the funnels that they're receiving their information on, unfortunately.
Bingo. Yeah.
Can I ask you, like, the people in your life, including your husband or your parents or friends, do they understand what you're going through? Like when you're going through symptoms, like how has that journey been as you experiencing symptoms?
Yeah, I feel really fortunate to have a lot of support from my family, from my friends, from my colleagues around this journey. And, I think part of it is, I'm able to explain it to them in a way that they understand without coming at it with like, oh my gosh, big pharma, medications, doctors, all bad, bad, bad. Instead, I'm coming at it of like, here is the neurochemistry that's happening. Here's the clinical studies, and here's how it's showing up in me. And you can see it. Like, and so I have a hard time of finding that balance of expressing like this rage that I have, and also just trying to understand that like, in order to get my message out to others,
I know
there's got to be this compassion of like, let's fill that gap of information that you don't have. So yes, my husband is my biggest supporter in all of this. He has been fundamental in all of this. I tell him probably once a week, I couldn't do this without you. And he's like, no, you couldn't. I'm like, no, I actually couldn't. Like, you don't understand how many people in this community try to go on this journey by themselves or without a proper support system. And unfortunately, they are not able to get so far because you do fall victim into your own kind of delusions, for lack of better term, of should I be feeling this? Should I not? Am I okay? Like, you need that person, from the looking glass, looking back in and saying, listen, I can see how you're showing up. It's not representative of how you're feeling.
exactly. That's right.
Yeah. So I have an incredible support system, and I'm very grateful for that.
Well, definitely thank hubby on that one, because you're right.
Yeah.
I think that it's imperative that we have support. And I know that like it is extremely difficult for us, to say the least. It's also really difficult for them. And I think that needs to be acknowledged. Like it's difficult in a different way. And it's like they never saw their life going that way. And I mean, I'm very spiritual. So I believe that like on a soul level, like this was part of the plan, but the veil here is so thick. None of us are aware of that here. And so it's so honorable to walk both sides, for us to be the ones that are going through it, and then the people to stand by us, right? So it's it's admirable, you know? So thank hubby for all of us.
For sure, for sure. We need more people like him out there to support
That's
this
right.
community.
That's right. Rinse and repeat. We need to rinse and
Yeah,
repeat.
yeah,
And let me ask you about like the work. I know people will, all the followers always ask about the symptoms, and I know we spoke a little bit about it. Could
yeah.
you speak about like what was your like if what is the worst experience you've had like symptom wise? Like what like and you could talk about a few or one, whatever you feel comfortable talking about.
I mean, honestly, I think the worst symptom was the symptoms I experienced without recognizing I was going to experience symptoms because they just hit me so blindly. I wasn't expecting them. If you can at least expect a symptom, you can kind
Totally
of
agree.
bear that brunt a little bit more. So when I was hit with that acute withdrawal initially, when I essentially cold turkeyed, that was the worst of it. Again, like brain zaps, lots of anxiety, paranoia, some insomnia, gut issues. Like I couldn't keep food down. And I'm sure I had more, but again, like I didn't go into that experience expecting symptoms. So I wasn't really able to, kind of objectively sit back and say, okay, I'm noticing this and this and this. It was more just kind of like in retrospect, like shit, it was a lot. This journey has been a lot different. So in the beginning of the tapering, it was a lot more mild to be expected, right? Like you're much higher on the graph. So that for me was brain fog, fatigue, definitely some moodiness, especially like partway through the taper. I'd have days where I had some anxiety for sure. Thankfully, I never really felt depressed. But that also could like be my persona. I tend to lean more anxious than depressed. So I think that's just kind of how symptoms showed for me. It wasn't until about probably fall of last year when my symptoms really kind of upped the ante and increased and took a turn for the worse. I mean, like I told you, I had gone an entire year with playbook symptoms. I could tell you exactly what I was going to feel basically on the exact day. And there was this comfort in it. And then all of a sudden, I just got hit with these symptoms that I had never experienced before. 2-3 hours of sleep a night, this inner like restlessness, agitation, which I now understand could have been akathisia. I definitely had a lot of paranoia again at some points. I would just break out in tears for no reason, just start sobbing. The word recall was really impacted for me. I would be on a call with a client because up until about probably 6 or 8 months ago, like I was a full-time health coach. And I was on calls with clients and I'm here trying to coach them and be their biggest cheerleader. And I'm like, I can't even get words out to support you right now. And so I'm incredibly grateful that my work and my boss has been so gracious with me during this. And we've kind of reestablished my roles and responsibilities so that I can continue this journey and still show up in my role there. Otherwise, I'd have to let go of one because I could not do both. But yeah, I think if I were doing any kind of a faster taper at this point, I'd be having incredible symptoms. But I am doing a really slow, mild taper. I just started micro tapering too, which supposedly is supposed to be like super easy on the nervous system. I will say that I did acupuncture last week for the first time, and that threw me into a tizzy of withdrawal, which was so fascinating. I don't know if it was just like, moving the energy around in the body or if it was just activating parts of the nervous system that were not active. I don't know what it was, but that took me by surprise.
That's really common, by the way. Like some people it helps, and then there's some people like for me it would sedate me, but increase dizziness, increase a lot of other symptoms, and then I kind of just had to write it out. It's really interesting, but we see this across the community. Yeah.
It was fascinating because you just hear all of this like applause of it. Like, you should try acupuncture. You should try acupuncture. So I did, and it was awful. So I am curious to try it again when my nervous system calms
Mm.
down a little bit, just to see if it's a matter of if I'm flaring or not, if that's the case. But yeah, I think the biggest symptom for me right now, honestly, is learning how to manage my emotions, because I have an emotional landscape that I've never been exposed to.
And it's that alone is a fascinating topic. That
Yeah.
alone of like being on it on such a young age and never really accessing a range that was your human right to,
Yeah, I think about that a lot.
So that again, that's a topic on its own. I'm curious and I think you spoke a little bit about it, but why don't we talk a little bit about like you becoming a functional brain health coach? Like, so what was it specifically? And you may have touched on it a little bit actually, but like, what is it that led you to do this? And what is that exactly? So why don't you explain what that means?
Yes. Oh, I'd love to. Okay. So, interestingly enough, like growing up as a child, aside from my antidepressant, you would have to pry my mouth open to take any kind of a medication. Ibuprofen, Advil, Tylenol, cold medicine. Like I've never been somebody that just jumps to Western medicine, which is just so fascinating considering I think it's always just kind of been this core belief in me, but I just felt trapped on the SSRI. So I kind of pushed that away of like, you don't count.
Yeah.
Everything else though, but you don't count. So anyways, I've always kind of had that core belief, and I've always kind of transitioned my lifestyle and how I nourished my body through kind of a root cause, more natural perspective. And so in college, I studied health sciences. So I kind of opened my eyes to the world of naturopathy, functional medicine, allopathic and conventional medicine versus, Eastern medicine approaches. That was fascinating to learn. And right out of college is when I landed an opportunity to work for a brain health company that was just using supplements at the time. And they were supplements to encourage neuronal development, increase BDNF, increase, all of the good things that you want to in the brain, the hippocampus, like reverse atrophy, all of those things. And that intrigued me. And so, what was interesting is that we were a small and nimble team, and my boss at the time was trying to grow her company to become more aligned with services rather than supplements. Like, how can we help people to actually take care of themselves from a brain health standpoint? So we actually co-created this certification and program together, and just started learning about like the functional medicine approach to brain health. What are like the root causes that actually blossom into anxiety and depression and, mania and all of these different things. Obviously there's the external world and forces at play always, but there's a lot of stuff internally that goes on too that transpires into these symptoms that we then pathologize and medicate. And so that is really the work of me being a functional brain health coach and just a health coach in general. It's really just taking inventory on what are the internal and genetic and lifestyle factors that could be contributing to how you and your brain are showing up in this world.
Yeah, it's quite fascinating actually. So I'm going to take a look more into the role because I think it's quite interesting. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I am curious of like with the work that you do, like what are the patterns that you see repeatedly, like in the stories of others, either on the psych meds or coming off, if you're able to answer that?
We are living in a world of convenience, and convenience is killing us. Convenience of not having to memorize things like directions, phone numbers, birthdays, relying it on your phone. Convenience in the sense of the food that we eat. Everything is highly processed. There's low nutrient density. We have a lot of deficiencies and a lot of inflammatory responses to the foods that we're eating. And then the amount of, stimulation that we are exposed to, like this convenience of being able to open your phone and pull something up, and the convenience of having, 12 text messages come through at a time and feeling like you need to answer them. Like you're always on edge. So we're overstimulated, we're overinflamed, we're undernourished, we're just,
right.
our body and our brains are on fire. And it's a product of the environment that we live in.
And that is beautifully said, because it couldn't be any more accurate, right? And like all of this has an influence on the wiring of our nervous system, right?
Yeah.
Just inflammation, right? Oxidative stress, all of that. So what has this journey taught you about resilience, identity, and self-trust?
It's been a shaky relationship.
Yeah.
It really has. I've had to lean heavily on my own spirituality. I've had to lean heavily on just trusting that life works out, and life will play out the way that it's supposed to. But from a resilience standpoint and a self-trust standpoint, I do think that it's the byproduct of being able to really just exist in the shit of it all.
That's right.
Just exist and trying not to fix and trying not to run from, and just acknowledging that, like, some of the beauty of this experience is that you learn to be okay with being uncomfortable, and that increases your capacity to then continue on with this journey. And if you can't, I feel like that's a very fundamental, foundational thing that you have to learn and acknowledge before you can really take on this journey, because you are going to be tested and tested and tested again, and you are going to come across so many circumstances and instances that you're going to question everything that you're doing, but you just have to trust that your body knows what to do. It's your body is always on your side. It wants you to thrive.
That's right.
It wants you to see the other side of this. So if you just trust that it's going to do what it needs to do for you, it's probably not going to be a fun experience at sometimes, but you will get to a point where you can look back and say, I made the right choice.
It's so true. And it's like, isn't it interesting how, right, antidepressants is essentially, it is a form of coping mechanism, right? Like, yes, it causes physical dependence, while alcohol, for example, causes addiction, right? And but there are fundamentally no difference between those people leaning to alcohol versus us leaning to a psych drug. Like, and that could be a controversial look, but ultimately it is a coping mechanism. And it's like, now it's like, we found this coping mechanism, and now we have to live on the complete opposite side of knowing what it feels like to feel everything tenfold, right? And I know some people don't have that ability, like they have like emotional anesthesia, which is like the numbing of both negative and positive, and that's devastating in its own way, right? And but it's interesting of like, it's kind of one of those great journeys, right, where we look for coping, and then we have to feel the full spectrum of everything tenfold on the other side.
I think you're spot on that these are coping mechanisms. They really, truly are. I mean, there is no single study that's showing that there's actually a chemical deficiency they're solving. So if there's any benefit of this, then it's complete placebo based on our perception that it's working for us.
100%. The science behind it is all rubbish. Like, I've never read, there's nothing to all of it that exists. And that is a topic on its own, right? But I guess my last question, and after I would like you to share where people can find you on social media and all of that. But as my final question, I would love to hear of like, and we kind of touched a little bit on it, but like, what are the greatest gifts that have come out of this journey so far that you're aware of?
I think the greatest gift of this journey has been to reach depths of my healing that I never thought possible, to essentially rewrite my relationship with anxiety and my mental health, and to no longer feel as if I am an anxious person. I always identified myself with, I have an anxiety disorder, I have panic disorder. And the greatest gift now is that I don't have either of those, but I have experienced anxiety and I have experienced panic attacks. So separating myself from the emotion and giving myself more autonomy over my identity has been really powerful.
That sounds like grace, my friend. You know, that sounds like grace. Well, thank you. I want to make sure that we also get that the followers can find you on social media. If you don't mind sharing, you know, wherever, whatever platforms, wherever you want to share, let us know.
Yeah, so I'm on, I think all of them. I'm on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Facebook, Unmedicating Me. And our certification program for becoming a functional brain health coach is the Functional Brain Health Institute.
Awesome. And I'm going to get all these links from you, by the way, and I'm going to put them right in the description so everyone can find them. Okay. But yeah, Kelsey, this was so great. And it was such an honor to have you on the channel. And I'm so happy that you were able to come and be vulnerable and share your truth.
Thank you so much for having me and letting me have this space to share. Really appreciate everything that you're doing as well.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Well, I'll speak to you shortly.
All right. Thanks.
Missing home, missing the things that you call upon, setting sun.